go with that right back on that side.
And I knew that she didn't know. So like, what was the reason? Like, oh yeah, so why did I do that? No, this is the same girl that I gave a bloody nose to. If your name is Savannah and you went to first grade with me, I am so
All the little kids are
Well,
over there.
ladies and gentlemen, we're on our way to Lahaska. Again, we'll be there in
We
about
got
20
two.
minutes or so.
You can share.
You can have mine.
Fine. Be that way.
Well, if he's gonna eat it, let him eat it.
Well, as long as he's not hungry.
Now, our passenger station is right over to the left-hand side of the train. It has a pointed turret roof, if you look at it carefully. It was designed by noted Philadelphia architect Frank Furness. It served as a waiting room for passengers, as well as a place to purchase train tickets to just about any location around North America. It also had a telegraph office, which was maintained here with an operator from the Philadelphia, Reading, and Huntsville Telegraph Company to send and receive messages for the town of New Hope.
That's a pretty little
These
park.
messages sent in Morse code
Whoa!
moved along a series of wires strung between wooden poles along the track.
That was a fireman's car.
And the perils of
Pauline.
Perils of Pauline Bridge.
Whoa, look at that go. Whoa, that is pretty
Yeah, the
good.
stream's really
We're
going.
crossing over a trestle bridge. I'd like to call this trestle bridge Pauline's Trestle in honor of the movie The Perils of Pauline, which was filmed in this area in 1914. There were 18 episodes in this series of movies.
Wow.
They were black and white and silent movies, each lasting 15 to 20 minutes, in which Pauline,
It's been up.
who was played by the actress Pearl White, was always in a situation of nearly life and death proportions.
Yep.
And she was always rescued by the hero of the movie, Harry. So on the right-hand side of our train, there's a small creek known as the Aquatong Creek. And we have several buildings on the
Look how
right-hand
much
side.
money it did.
There
Wow.
used
What
to
do they
be
have?
9 water-powered grist mills that were built along this creek
Wow.
in the
Wow, look at all this
1700s,
stuff that
between
they put out to
1700
look
and
at
1790. Most of them, however, have been destroyed over the years, but there's a couple of them that still exist today, and I'll try to point out some of them to you. Well, the idea for our railroad was born in the middle of the 19th century, and at that time, local farmers and other residents were looking to connect Bucks County with the big city of Philadelphia. Well, they had the stagecoaches on the Old York Road, and these took quite a while to get into Philadelphia, and they were looking for something much faster. The Delaware Canal did run right through New Hope, and did allow them to ship some more non-perishable items, but it could still take a while to get to Philadelphia, and of course, when it froze over in the winter, transportation was impossible.
I always loved
The
that house.
1850s, the Belvedere Delaware Railroad
Wow, look
operated
at that.
across the river
Wow.
in New Jersey through Lambertville, allowing locals on that side of the river to have a faster route to Philadelphia. Finally, the tracks between New Hope and Ivyland and Philadelphia were completed in 1891, and the very first passenger train departed from the New Hope station in 1891. This was a branch of the Reading Railroad. The Reading Railroad operated passenger trains until 1952 on this branch, and it continued to have freight service on this branch for another decade until the early 1960s. And then in 1966, the New Hope and Ivyland Railroad was incorporated. We we've been running our passenger trains and an occasional freight train on these tracks between New Hope and Warminster ever since.
Ah.
I gotta say, this train is really wobbly.
It's an old railroad line.
No, but I didn't expect it to be this wobbly. Oh my god. Wow.
But then it's interesting to understand or remember that the land on both sides of our train used to be farms, small family-owned farms.
wow.
Many of them were dairy farms. One of the most prominent dairy farming families in this area was the Reeder family. And the most prominent member of the Reeder family in the mid-1800s was Eastburn Reeder. Well, Eastburn Reeder was Pennsylvania's very first food and dairy commissioner, and he was also a stockholder in the railroad being built between New Hope and Philadelphia. So he thought he was a pretty important person, and that the Reading Railroad should build a train depot at the next railroad crossing, which was called Reeder Road.
Ah.
Well, the Reading Railroad did not do that. They decided just to build a small shelter. In the shelter, they put a flag, and so if you were a passenger wanting to get on the railroad train at Reeder Road, you would wave your flag at an approaching steam locomotive, and the engineer in the steam locomotive would blow the horn or whistle in a particular pattern and stop the train.
A whistle stop.
Yeah.
This became known as a flag stop or whistle stop. So about half of the stops between New Hope and Philadelphia were in fact flag stops, and the other half of the station stops had depots, train depots like we have in New Hope. So Lahaska did have a depot. It was the first depot south of New Hope. There were two other stops. Both of them were flag stops. One of them was at Hood Road or Hood Station, which is near the mansion called the Hofnagel Mansion, and the other one was at Reeder Road.
That's haunted.
Well, our train today is being pulled by a diesel-electric locomotive, number 8218, which was built in 1957.
Wow.
It was built by the General Motors Company of London, Ontario, Canada. It was built for the Canadian Pacific Railroad. This is Reeder Road. Reeder Road, right here. And the flag stop at Reeder Road would have been right on the right-hand side of the train next to the flashing red lights.
Wow.
So the locomotive was built in 1957 for the Canadian Pacific Railroad. And it was built in order to replace the steam locomotives that were being run by the Canadian Pacific Railroad up in Canada up until that time.
Oh my god, look.
This is a GP9 series
It's still got water in it.
locomotive. The GP standing for general purpose, and the 9 is the series number, so that's a pretty low number. It's one of the earliest of the locomotives.
Wow.
And it was intended to be used in freight service as well as passenger service. It was finally sold to the New Hope and Ivyland Railroad in 2015.
Wow.
And we use this locomotive to pull mainly our passenger trains like this one, as well as some of our occasional freight trains on the New Hope line.
Wow.
The first car on our train today is our open-air car. This used to be a coach car built in the early 1900s for the Reading Railroad, and it was built by the Bethlehem Shipbuilding Company of Wilmington, Delaware.
Huh.
The second car in our train is our parlor car. It's also used to be a coach car. built for the Reading Railroad, and it was converted into a parlor car by the New Hope Railroad after it was purchased by our railroad in 1966. The third and fourth cars are coach cars. They have not been renovated, although they have been updated. In fact, the coach car where some of you are sitting today was built in 1914.
Wow.
It was used in commuter service around Philadelphia by the Reading Railroad. So in the days between 1891 and 1952, these coach cars were still being used by the Reading Railroad in and out of the Reading Terminal Station in downtown Philadelphia.
Wow.
The last car on our train today is our caboose. It was built originally in 1921, and then it was changed to a steel caboose in 1932 or so, and it was part of the Boston and Maine Railroad. Our next railroad crossing is coming up. Here it is. This is Aquatong Road. Now, Aquatong is a Delaware Indian word which means spring in the bushes. And that's because the Lenni Lenape Indian tribe that lived in this area prior to 1700 built their village above an enormous underground spring, which they called the Aquatong Spring. So that's where they get the name for the road, which goes right by the spring.
The spring of my grandmother's place.
However, in the 1700s, when the English settlers moved here, the Quakers moved here from England, they called this Paxton's Corner, named after a prominent English family that had moved to this area. And the Paxtons built their very first farmhouse in about 1747. And they called their house the Rolling Green Mansion. The Rolling Green Mansion. Now, in those days, you named your house. You didn't have a house address. So you didn't have numbers.
Oh,
They
that's
didn't
quite
have a mailman that would deliver your mail. You'd have to go into town to pick up your mail, let's say at the local tavern or at the city hall or someplace. That's where all the mail was delivered. You pick up your mail there. Gradually, people moved into this area by the mid-1800s, and by 1885, the first area post office had opened up in town.
They give those
This
pretzels
next
at
railroad crossing coming up is a Lower Mountain Road.
Huh?
Lower Mountain Road.
Guys, 13?
Now you can tell when we're coming to a railroad crossing,
No.
our
By my knowledge,
engineer
I haven't.
blows the horn on the
I don't
engine in a
know.
particular pattern. So you hear two long blasts of the horn, followed by one short blast, and then one long blast. Like Morse
You can
code,
tell that was,
two longs,
that's all
one
farm
short,
country.
and one long.
There's no trees in it.
Now sometimes we do see some wild animals around the train on these train trips. We often see deer, but sometimes we'll see wild turkeys or
Oh,
fox.
Wow.
I will occasionally see some eagles flying in the sky.
We've been seeing large birds.
yeah, we've been seeing a lot of them.
We haven't seen any deer today. It's too wet, so they're probably hiding from the rain.
They're not stupid.
Coming up on the right-hand side of the train, we're going to be passing by an old stone farmhouse, which was built in 1844. It's now a privately owned home, so the people don't live in the stone farmhouse part of the house, I don't think anymore, at least not year-round. It doesn't have air conditioning or heating probably, but they did add on a living quarter at the back of the house, and that's where they live. The red barn is new. The middle building is sort of like the garage, or it used to be called the carriage house. That's where they would keep their wagons and their horses. Front part there is the stone part. It's the original building. I think that's one of the neatest houses on our trip. Now on the right-hand side of the train, you'll see what appears to be a farm. This is in fact an old dairy farm, which is known as the Bradshaw Farm. It's 163 acres of farmland, but don't look for any cows anymore since the dairy operation ceased about 30 years ago or so. And it is still an active farm, and they grow crops such as corn, alfalfa, and
Wait, that's a
soybeans.
bat?
And they also grow a lot of trees for the local nursery. So look at all the trees there. Many of them are Christmas trees. And if you live in Bucks County, it's possible that you did buy your Christmas tree from this farm here.
Wow, that's cool.
If you walk up the little farm road there, you can actually go to the barn where they used to milk the cows.
Oh,
And people still live on this farm, so you can see the houses over here on the right. These are part of the farms. I think they're more than likely rented out now. You could therefore, you can't own the farm, but you can work on the farm and you can live on the farm.
wow.
So on the left-hand side of the train, which is the other side, the left-hand side of the train, we're going to be passing by a typical house from this part of Bucks County. This would be one of the larger homes. This is a single-family home. I like to call this my home that I live in. If I could afford to live in that house, except for the lawn. I think the lawn is too big, but nonetheless, the owners of that house live there. We're crossing a road known as Street Road, and Lahaska, the town of Lahaska, is down the road to the right about a mile. Now we're in the old train station area of the Lahaska stop. There used to be a train depot here in Lahaska, as I previously mentioned, but after they discontinued passenger service on this branch line in 1952, the Reading Railroad decided it wanted to move all of the train depots or destroy them or whatever.
Wow.
And a local farmer purchased the train depot in about 1955 and had it moved over to our left about a half a mile through the trees and brush. Unfortunately, we can't see the building. However, it still exists today. It's now a small cabin.
Whoa.
So it would be nice to be able to see it. Our train is stopped now. Our locomotive is going to uncouple from the south end of the train
Let's sit over on the other
and
side.
is going to move southward about a quarter mile or so on the mainline track, and then get on the siding track. And you can see the siding track over on the left.
Let's-
The locomotive is going to get on the siding and go north,
What happened?
and then recouple to the
That's the other, that's the
last
other
part of the
coach
train,
car.
which is our caboose, so you can't really see them recoupling, but the locomotive is going to go by. What I'd like to have you do is, if you can, just wave at the engineer and the conductor in the caboose as they go, as in the engine as they go by. See if they'll wave back.
Or blow the horn.
So in about 7 minutes, our train will be testing its brakes, and
Oh,
getting
thank you.
ready to go back to New Hope.
Really, you left your phone over there and your water.
And so then Matthew leave his Pepsi.
The Pepsi is empty.
Well, then we'll put them in the garbage.
I kind of want candy.
Huh?
I want candy.
What happened?
I want candy.
Well, I didn't see any candy.
No, the guy had candy in the other basket.
Very little. I mean, just get, yeah, hello, good morning, cheers. I can swear, so. Yeah, I learned it actually, there you go, there. You leave the black chair there.
Here it comes.
Oh, no.
And every time
Oh,
they
shoot. I need to see it.
Alright, here it is, everybody wave.
There's getting to intake.
Oh, I didn't get it.
I got it.
Damn it. Shit.
Yeah.
I screwed it up.
Yeah, I really get that a little bit there.
Damn it. got it.
I just got the. I got it. I got the ventilation.
You got the ventilation?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They teach us
Like, see?
in Polish.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Let me give the guy the thing.
Yeah, right. And yeah, virtually. Yeah, they figured. Thank you so much. I shall return. Yes. We have candy. Sure, we have candy. I don't have Twix. I have Kit Kat. I have Hershey's. I have Hershey's bar. I have Reese's. Okay. Oh, you get it? I'll bring it back.
All right.
The wafer. The wafer. Oh, look, you can see it.
What's that? Yeah?
You can
That's it.
slice
So the Reading
this.
Railroad was formed in 1833. It was one of the first railroads in the United States. The very first railroad in the United States was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad.
Oh, Baltimore, Ohio.
The B&O was called.
Vienna.
They were formed in 1831. So we haven't had railroads as long as they have in Europe. In England, the railroad was invented, and the locomotive was actually invented in England
Yeah.
in the 1820s. The steam engine was invented in England in the 1820s.
The rackets.
So the United States sort of wasn't first. But they did have an extensive system of railroads, and they had nearly at the top of their railroad history for numbers of miles of tracks, they had nearly 210,000 miles of tracks, which is more than they have in Europe. But now the number of track miles has reduced to almost half of what they used to have.
Hello again.
Hello again. A Kit Kat for the gentleman.
Thank you.
My pleasure. She's
So we
all
only
set. I
have
don't need
about
any
110
signature or
or
anything. She's all set.
115,000 miles of track now in the United States. But in the 1900s, the start of the 1900s,
How?
in order to go anywhere, including to go to school, the only method of transportation for many people was to take the train. So if you wanted to go to school in high school, let's say you want to go to high school in New Hope, you could purchase a train ticket
Wow.
to go to school from Lahaska. See, Lahaska didn't have a high school. The only high school in the area was in New Hope. So if you were lucky enough to let your parents would let you go to high school, you had to be 16 years old to go to high school.
Wow.
If you were lucky enough to go to high school in 1900, you could take the train to school, and it cost 40 cents a week.
Ah.
That was 5 round-trip tickets per week for 40 cents.
Oh. Wow. What in
I don't know what that would cost today to take the train, but I can tell you
How much is
that
$19?
$19.04.
it used to be a dollar to take the train all the way into Philadelphia, and now from Warminster it's
There's a
$10.
pen in my bag.
The price has gone up quite a bit.
Where do I find it?
Oh, look where the comb is. That's not. That's a fancy pen. You got to screw off the cap,
Oh.
and that's too wide of a tip.
It's called the Edge.
Of course, taking the train in 1900 was different than it is today. People didn't take the train to go into Philadelphia to work. They would take the train to go into Philadelphia
Look where
to
the comb
shop.
is.
The what?
That's where the shopping, the big shopping stores, the department stores were in Philadelphia.
Ah.
So if you wanted a new dress or a new suit or a new hat, and you lived in New Hope and you needed to have a dress or a suit to go to a wedding or to a fancy party, you take the train in to Philadelphia to go to Wanamaker's,
Yeah.
which was the big department store in town, or Macy's in New York City, same equivalent, and that's where you get your clothes, unless you would make them.
I was in school as a
And
kid.
that's a
I have a
beautiful,
distinct memory of being in
beautiful
first grade,
Boilermakers Park.
going on a friend break.
Yeah, well, I don't know much about the department stores in Philadelphia. I do know a little bit more about the department stores like Macy's in New York City, and they're huge. I don't know how many people still go to Macy's in New York City,
A lot.
but yeah, I assume it's a lot of people. But New York City has a lot of people in the city too. But at any rate, that's what you did. You didn't go in to go to work. It wasn't the same. Nowadays, you take your commuter trains to go into New York City or Philadelphia, and that's where you work. And actually, the popularity of commuter trains is increasing now. More people want to take the train into work because it's cheaper than it is to drive, and it takes less time.
Yeah, wait till you get down to the
It
price.
takes an hour to take the train in from Warminster into Philadelphia.
That's not that bad.
But if you want to drive, it probably takes an hour and a half or 2 hours.
That's a good day.
Actually, where I live in Yardley, Pennsylvania, which is right across the Delaware River from Trenton. And I can be in Penn Station in New York City in about an hour. Or I can be in downtown Philadelphia in about an hour. And it's actually closer to go into New York, to go into Philadelphia. But for some reason, the train takes longer. So I think partly it's because the train going from Trenton all the way into New York City is a straight track. It doesn't make any real curves. It also goes 110 miles an hour between stations.
Wow.
And I think that's faster than the track speed going in from where I live, Yardley, into Philadelphia. They use a different speed tracks. They use tracks that are owned by CSX, which are freight line tracks, so they have to go slower. The tracks,
I saw that.
The tracks you're on now, these tracks are 30 miles an hour. But we, generally speaking, only go about 10 to 15 miles an hour on these tracks. Right. One of the things that I think the local people here should do at Christmas time is to decorate their houses so we could show their decorations on this trip, because we have Christmas trains which are called the North Pole Express, and at night and late afternoon and night when it gets dark, it would be nice to have them all decorated. But unfortunately, most of the houses are not decorated.
Say, hey, you do like a little bit of a chocolate. They'll put some stuff up. Wow, that was.
If I had $8 million and I had to be here and they asked me, I would go all out.
You can have that
Like I would have a Jack Skellington fence. I would literally have everything for Halloween,
All right, so this is Lower Mountain Road.
Halloween, Christmas.
You'll be able to see through the trees some really big houses on the right-hand side of the train if you look carefully.
Whoa.
Look at my, these are really huge houses. The trouble is you have so many leaves on the trees now you can't see them. If you came back after the
Michael
trees
Jackson
fall,
is not a
the leaves
person to be
fall,
emulated.
You'd be able to see them much better. A lot of land too. They've got a couple of acres of land around their houses. New Hope is basically starting during the early periods of the state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and then the American Revolutionary War with George Washington. I'm not sure that George Washington ever stayed in New Hope or made a meal in New Hope, but I do know that one of his famous generals did. I was told or read that Benedict Arnold, who was a American general, he was in the American Army before he became a traitor and joined the British Army in the 1780 or so, whenever that was.
You never heard of Benedict Arnold?
Did, in fact,
You never heard of Benedict Arnold?
He was actually the general in charge of the land around New Hope. General Washington was the commanding chief of the American Revolutionary Army, and he gave Benedict Arnold command of the Philadelphia branch of the Army.
Wow.
So he was supposed to guard Philadelphia against any British attacks. This was after 1776, when General George Washington crossed the Delaware on Christmas Eve. And George Washington crossing right on the Delaware.
That's not that far from where New Hope is.
That was kind of interesting that people don't realize, but the military, the army that was stationed in Trenton, they were all German. Houston, they were mercenaries. The British had paid them to be at the army base in the fort at Fort Trenton. And they were all in bed asleep when Washington came into their encampment and captured them without firing a shot. He didn't injure or kill any soldier on either side.
Because they were all drunk.
They came out and they had a nice big party and they were sleeping it off.
They made them, that's right.
What a hangover to wake up to.
At any rate, so Washington did control then New Jersey. And the two main highways between Philadelphia and New York were, one highway went through Trenton and the other highway went through New Hope. And there were ferries that crossed the Delaware River at that time. And the bridges, the first bridge across the Delaware was at Trenton. The second bridge was at New Hope, and that's where the highway was. It was called the Upper York Road and the Lower York Road.
This is so true though.
So the York Road still exists, however, the one that goes through New Hope is called Highway 202. So here we are in Reeder Road.
Wow.
In the old days, it took 3 days, I think. I said 3 days to walk between Philadelphia and New York City, Upper York Road.
Looks like a lot of clay deposits. The soil looks like a lot of clay deposits.
Reading Railroad, there were a few very important businesses that
There it
the
is.
freight trains would come to. If you
There's
look
the old
over on
platform.
right-hand side of the train, you see that concrete wall there. That's all that's left of a very important company called the Pennsylvania Shale Brick Company. Now it was founded in 1915. They made very sturdy construction bricks, many of which were used in the construction of the Empire State Building. They printed the letters NH on each brick, standing for New Hope. So if you're ever walking around the outside of the Empire State Building, look up and see if you can see the NH on any of the bricks. They would have been built there, the bricks would have been constructed there, and then taken by the Reading Railroad train cars to Philadelphia, and then the Reading Railroad would take them into Manhattan. Unfortunately, the Pennsylvania Shale Brick Company went bankrupt in the Great Depression in the late 1930s, and the building was torn down in the early 1940s during World War II. So there's not much of the building left, but there is the concrete wall.
Wow, look at that old house.
You should put a light back there.
So we're coming to an interesting building that's kind of dilapidated here. It's on the right-hand side of the train. Looks like an old factory. And there are some apartment buildings or apartments in there over to the right. See that building to the right? Andy Warhol, the American painter in the 1970s, used to come to New Hope during the summer, and he would rent a room in that building for the summer months, and then he would do some painting.
That's a nice hammock.
So there were a lot of artists in this area in the summer particularly, but this was an artist colony in the 1970s. So a lot of famous artworks were made by the painters and sculptors and so on who lived in New Hope at that time.
Look at that cute little greenhouse.
Yeah. Stops halfway up.
So we're coming close to New Hope now, so this would be a good opportunity to look around your seats very carefully to see if there are any items, personal items that you want to take home with you. There may be, maybe not. Maybe you don't want to take your small child home with you and you want to leave them on the train, which is fine with us. We'll just put it to work at the gift shop.
There you go. There, you want that job? Want that job?
If you're interested in finding out more information about our excursion trains for the rest of the season, please get on our website, which is www.newhoperailroad.com.
Look at that rock face.
You can purchase tickets. You can find out how much tickets would cost. You can see when we have our Norfolk Express.
Wow, look at that waterfall.
We'll have trick-or-treat trains, Halloween trains, fall foliage trains starting in October. We've got quite a bit of activity for the next 3 months on the New Hope Railroad. We also have our gift shop on the website, so you can buy souvenirs and
I
they'll
already know
mail
what
them
my
to you.
Halloween costume is.
What?
Link.
Oh, you want your link this year?
And I'm gonna be the dragon again, because that costume costs
One of my favorite
$50.
houses is on the other side, the left-hand side of the train. You see that building there? That is like a 4-story or 5-story summer house, we call it.
Huh.
It has a swimming pool in the basement. It has a 5-car garage and a mother-in-law quarters over there across the driveway.
Haha, mother-in-law
That'd be a great
quarters.
place for a large family to live in. You could afford to buy the house.
Wow.
Didn't know they were selling.
So we're coming into New Hope. We'll be crossing over the Pauline Trestle Bridge here in a minute. And we'll see a grist mill, an old grist mill on the left-hand side of the train. Looks like a warehouse. But that used to be a grist mill that was built in the early 1700s. And it's been renovated into a condominium.
Oh.
So people live there, and they buy sort of apartments in that building, and they live there.
Yeah, they just jumped this. That's all.
You look down, when we get to the bridge here, Look down, you can see the little creek. That's the Aquatong Creek we're crossing.
Aquatong.
You sure put in a lot of bamboo.
Yeah, they put a lot of bamboo in years ago. It's now outlawed. You're not supposed to plant bamboo. They can't get it out. It's like weeds. Very difficult to get bamboo out of the ground. You have to sandblast it. Get dynamite blast it out. There's the Aquatong Creek there below us. And it ends up in the Delaware River, in the town of New Hope. There's quite a bit of water in the little creek now. Here we are. This is Ferry Street, the first street in New Hope, Ferry Street. Down to the right, at the end of Ferry Street, that would be where they used to have their ferry across the Delaware over to Lambertville. And that's where the Logan Inn is located. And our next street coming up is Bridge Street. And to the right, that's where the bridge is that crosses the Delaware River and goes to Lambertville. So they're handy for me to remember to tell you about them because they're named Bridge Street and Ferry Street. So that's where the main drag of New Hope is, down Bridge Street and Ferry Street. Now we're coming into the New Hope station, and we'd like to ask you to please remain seated until the train comes to it. The train stop at the platform. I will let you know when it is safe for you to stand up and then come to the doorway that you entered the train from. So that's where I'll be standing to let you get off the train. Thanks again, everybody, for traveling with us today, and hope that you have a great afternoon in New Hope.
Thank you.
The guy with the pumpkin hat looks like Ricky.
Does. We didn't get a ticket. They didn't give us a ticket. I guess we don't get out. Hey, look. While you're sick, you only sat this helpers beyond here.
All right, it's safe now to stand up and exit the train. This way out, please.
Leo, put